Greetings, Praxeum students, knights, and staff. This is our second Wednesday meditation. And this week I want to get into something a little different. Last week we did some of the history and mystery of the Force, and that kind of led into this weekend's lesson on the unknown infinite. So I want to bridge the gap now between the infinite and this Sunday's course, which is the Jedi, the Knight of the Force. Knight is a word that's been tied to the Jedi since its inception. I was once a Jedi Knight, the same as your father. And Knight has been misconstrued in our application and within the expanded mythos. It's been used as a rank. However, in the original mythos, it was less of a rank and more of a job. Because, if you watch the opening crawl to the Phantom Menace, it says 2 Jedi Knights were dispatched. A master and an apprentice, those are ranks. But they're both knights. They were both there to do what they did. They both were focused in the more physical manifestations of the Force, and they both came wielding laser swords. They were knights. And part of what the Jedi is intrinsically tied to the concept of the knight. Not completely, but it is a very large bit of the foundation of the idea of the path. So we look at the concept of a knight, and within history, a knight was one that ventured out to do what they were called to do within a code of propriety, typically a chivalric code. However, you get to the Knights of the East, which were predominantly the samurai, and their code wasn't really chivalric as much it was, because chivalry is more how you interact with other people, and Bushido is more how you present yourself to other people. It's not as much about the interaction as it is the internal action. The two complement each other fantastically, and we will get into that later in the course, but tonight we're going to talk about how are you the Knight of the Force. So this weekend we delved into the various minute phases and vibration rates of the Force, and it went from the internal to the dynamic to the living to the guiding, and then from there to the uniting, cosmic, and the infinite. The guiding is something that the community used to speak about a lot more often than it does now. And it was never in a definitive statement. It was is there a will of the Force? Does the Force guide you? Does it merely inform you? Does it control you? Things of the like. And the answer to that is all yes. Yes, there is a will. Yes, it will control you at times. Yes, it will inform you most of the time. And yes, you can pretty much tell it to go stuff itself. And you just, you go where the cards fall, and sometimes you should have listened, and sometimes it doesn't necessarily matter. But a Knight of the Force is one that learns how to hear it, how to feel that pull. And there are methods that we will be going over this weekend that will help to increase your sensitivity to that pull. Which is why we're going to discuss the why tonight. Why do we listen to the Force? Why do we give ourselves to the will of the Force? Within the Force, we are merely a single speck of dust. Not even that big. One molecule in a speck of dust. In comparison to the entire complexity of the Force. The Force moves at all times. It is a constant flow. It's a constant progression of time. The movement, the forward marching direction of the passing of time is the flow of the Force. It is the river. And I bring that up because rivers have currents, and those currents are caused by gravity and a topographical change. Sometimes they get to a very drastic topographical change, a waterfall. And this is important when it comes to whether or not you're going to act as a knight of the Force, or if you're going to act as a knight of your own will. Because, as I said, there are a lot of times that you can ignore the draw of the guiding, but oftentimes it is to your detriment. And we are all in this river. We're all headed towards this waterfall at one point or another. What you can do is you can try to tread water and stay in place. It's fighting against the current. Eventually you'll get tired, and you're going to go down the waterfall anyway, but you're going to be tired, beat up. You can try to swim for shore and get out of it. And some people can do that, but that's not the life of a Jedi. That's not why we are knights. And then you can relax and ride the top of the current. Like, when you're swimming, you can relax and your body will float, because our body is not heavier than water, because it is not completely water. There is air, and air floats. Which is why when you relax, you will float in water. Now, in a hard current, you may need to actively stay at the top of the current, because sometimes even relaxed, it'll try to drag you under and beat you up. So you have to go with the current. You have to swim with it. You have to pay attention to the obstacles that are coming, because you're going to get to that waterfall whether you like it or not, but you don't have to hit every rock on the way. You can look and pay attention and move forward with the current. The current's not going to stop. And the Knight of the Force feels that current and very carefully weighs whether or not they're going to swim with it, against it, or just get out of it. The answer is not always to swim with it. There are times that the flow of the Force is taking us places that we do not need to be. We could be in a situation where continuing to follow this direction that we are on, this energy, this flow, it could take us into harm's way in a way that we're not prepared for. It could create a massive health or monetary loss. There's a lot of ways that you can feel things going bad, but they're still going, and they're still going forward. And what you feel is that forward, that waterfall that's right in front of you, that's got a bunch of rocks in the way. And so the best option at that point is to get out, go around the rocks, then get back in. Sometimes you don't have time to do that, and all you can do is fight the flow. Sometimes you're fighting the current so that you can catch the next person coming down the river to save them from it too. So a Knight of the Force means that we get our information from the Force. We get our intuition from the Force. We do everything we can to make sure that we are open to the Force as much as possible, so that when a situation arises, we can know what to do. We can be informed to the situation so that we can choose what is the right thing to do. And whether it's go with the current, get out of the current, or fight the current, the Force will tell you which is the right thing to do. Because you will feel it. You will go, going with the current will get me killed. Getting out of the current will get someone else killed. I'm going to stand here and I'm going to catch people. And you'll know that's the right thing to do because you can feel the danger that is ahead of you. And you know there's more coming. You can feel them coming. I think that's one of the reasons that I began teaching when I did. In 1999, I'd been on the path for about 4 years. I opened a website called Jedi of the New Millennium because I felt the flow of the Force was heading towards something shortly after the turn of the century that was going to be detrimental, disastrous, dangerous, horrible. Didn't quite know what it was. Have my suspicions as to what it was now. But I felt this, and I felt that I needed to stand in the way and catch people, for lack of a better analogy at the time. And so I stood in the way and I taught people so that they could catch others, so they could stop themselves and catch others as they went down. And most of those people are long gone. It's a different era, different time. But those that are still around, the very few that they are still very good people, and they're still ones that will stand in the river to catch those coming after them when they have to. I don't like using the phrase standing in harm's way when I describe this, because there's not a guarantee that you're standing in anything's way, but you are stopping the harm that could come. Standing in harm's way means I am standing face to face with what is meaning to harm people. And yes, that is a thing that some of us prepare for, that more of us should prepare for, because there are times that there is danger in this world. I'm not saying you go get, black belt or Shidoshi license or learn to walk up walls or crawl across the tops of trees. I'm not talking about that. A little defensive study that can be more intellectual than anything else. A little bit of just a self-defense course, just so you know what it feels like to have somebody come at you, just to get that initial shot gone. That's enough. Some will find the Force in it way more, like I have. The Force for me is found in the movements of the martial arts and in the flow of the Force as it passes through me, out of me, and into the world around me. It is my physical Force art. Remember that phrase. We will use it more later. But it doesn't have to be combat. A little bit of preparedness goes a long way. And sometimes you will have to stand in harm's way. At that point, that preparedness is needed. But when I talk about standing in the river, I'm standing before you get to the harm. I'm standing on that caution roadwork sign that you get to a mile before. The left lane closed, and then you get some people, and everybody here that drives on an interstate is going to know exactly what I'm saying. You'll get the vast majority of people that will get out of the left lane because the left lane is closed due to an accident or debris or whatever. Doesn't usually say how much. Usually it's a Department of Transport sign or truck or something saying left lane closed 1 mile ahead. The majority of people will move out of that lane, and then you will have some of those self-centered, I'm in too big of a hurry to behave like a normal human being people, and they will fly down that, and they will either run into the debris that they were being warned against. Typically, there's usually a police officer sitting there waiting to ticket people that are doing that, because it's reckless endangerment when you're doing so much faster than the flow of traffic in a lot of places. But mostly, they get to the end of the line, and then they have to sit there. If nobody lets them in, then they get to sit there until the traffic that they just passes them. Which is irony at its finest. But standing in the river, we are that caution sign. Sometimes we're a caution sign that catches people. Sometimes we're a caution sign that just says, hey, get out of this lane. And you will have people that will take that warning. Some people that warning won't even apply to. If they weren't in the left lane to begin with, or they're getting off in less than a mile, that sign means nothing to them. Sure, good. Continue on. And then there are some people that will not listen. They think, no, I know better. We're all guilty of it. Every one of us at some point has ignored sound advice because, no, I know better. Night of the Force is driven by the knowledge that is afforded us by the Force. I spoke briefly this past weekend about the Akashic Temple or the Akashic Records, depending on where you've heard the phrase before. It is the depository of all knowledge. I personally, and this is just a theory, personally think that this is why humanity has to sleep. Because there is no real physiological reason that we have to get as much sleep as we do. Rest, absolutely, but sleep, if we don't sleep for several days, we start to hallucinate, and it will cause lots of psychological and physiological problems. But why? I personally think that when you go to sleep, whether you dream or not, I think a dream is just a screensaver for what I'm about to say, but you download your experiences of the day into the Akashic Records so that you still have access to it because you are connected to the Akasha. But it's not still bunched up in your head. You get to defrag, scan disk, and get it all out of the way. Empty the recycle bin and go on about your day. I personally feel that that is why we sleep. So that we can deposit our knowledge into the universe, so that it becomes part of the universe's knowledge. The subjective part. The universe, the Force, is all, and so all knowledge is the Force from an objective perspective. It's like looking at anything from a distance. When you look at the planet, you see blue water, green and brown land, and that's about it. Ice caps, clouds. You don't see houses. You don't see roads. You can see city lights if it's on the night side of the planet, on big populated areas, but there's lights everywhere. Like there's street lights on almost every street in the country, except for really backwood ones, like mine. There's not a street light anywhere near my house. But you don't see the houses. You don't see the roads. You don't see the development. You don't see the concrete metropolises that are the big cities of any country. You don't. When the sun's up, you see dirt and grass and water. That's how the Force sees all things, from that big perspective. And so all of the knowledge that is in the Akasha as the Force is all very objective information. It's very sterile. I think we download our subjective experiences to give detail. It's like Google Maps, where you zoom in and zoom in and zoom in, and then eventually you find roads. You find plots of land for cropland, how it's different colors because it's different vegetables. And you zoom in even further and you find roads and towns and houses, and you zoom in even further and you can tell what kind of car this guy owns. And, oh, hey, he was cutting his grass when the satellite took this picture. But that's the subjective. That is the hyper-focus points of the information. And that's why our information when we rest, when we give it to the Akasha, that's why it is important. It's because knowing what the map looks like from up close and from afar are both equally as important. And every level in between. This is the type of thing that a Knight of the Force would need to know how to access. And we will get into the deeper meditations needed for opening access to the Akasha. But it's not always a intentional thing. Once you break through that barrier, once you make that connection through your higher self into the knowledge repository of the cosmic force, on the edge of the unknown, where all knowledge, all subjective knowledge exists. Once you go in, you're kind of tapped into it. You will find at times that you remember how to do things you've never learned how to do. Never anything super huge or complex, but just like making a computer do something that you've never learned how to do, but you're like, oh, I know how to do that. Boom. Or using a tool properly that you've never laid hands on. You don't know what, it's a complex, weird tool with this handle over here and a hook there, and you don't know what it's for. And then you go, oh, that's for drum brakes. And anybody that's ever done drum brakes knows exactly what tool I'm talking about. It's a weird looking tool. And if you don't know what it's for, it looks like a medieval dental tool. It's kind of weird looking. But before I get off on a tangent, worse than I already have, once you make contact with the Akasha, you will learn things without learning them. You will remember things that you've never done. It is one of the gateways upon which we learn of our past lives. And that's another thing that we're not going to get into tonight, but we will get into. So this course differs from any of the other courses that are currently available at the Praxeum or anywhere else, in that it is exceedingly focused on a deeper connection with the Force rather than a broader application. A lot of people, when the community first started, we were worried about Force powers. Goofy name for it, but we wanted to know how to do the alter mind, the mind trick. We wanted to learn to see if we could do telekinesis. We wanted to learn how to do pyrokinesis or send pictures to each other across the internet with our brains, which I admit, I've done that too. We want to know how to run faster, push harder, be stronger, be more vital, be more alive. Change the way our body works by reprogramming it through the Force. It's called biokinetics. We focused on a lot of odd powers. The material we had at the time was a bunch of games and books that were just pretty much exploring the big main character and all of the cool powers he's learning for no reason. Learning how to just crush things and deflect energy with his hand. All kinds of interesting, weird things. And there was often discussion about reaching for more powers. Force powers are an absolute lie. Don't freak out. I'm not done. It's a lie because the way it is spoken and the way things are spoken often decide whether or not they're a truth or a lie. It's one of the many illusions that we will get into later in the course. There are no powers. There's power. There is power of the Force. There is the Force giving us power to do things that we can already do, but we are not strong enough to do. We can feel the echo of people's emotions, of their thoughts. That's empathy and telepathy right there. We can feel that. It's better when we have a strong personal connection with them, like the psychic telepathic bond that twins have. Karen and I were just talking about this last night, actually. Or the highly empathic nature of basic telepathy. Passive telepathy, as I've spoken of it in years past. Or receptive telepathy, where you open yourself up to the images that are floating around. Because you know that all thoughts are energy, and that energy spills out. And so you can intercept that energy and kind of decode it sometimes. Especially if someone doesn't have good control over their mind, because then it'll be spilling out all over the place. And we've all met people like that, where their mere presence is tiring because every bit of them is always going out into the world around them. There's no chill, to use that phrase of all things. But we've all met people like that. They're not bad people. They're usually fantastic people. Usually some of the best people to be around and some of the most fun people to hang out with. But there are times that just their sheer overpowering self pouring out at all times can be really exhausting to anyone that's receptive. But that's part of the Force. That's part of the Force that most people don't have to train right away. Like I said a minute ago, the twins with their telepathic bond. You get this kind of bond with close friends, family, intimate partners. You get this kind of bond. It builds as your energy intermingles. The Force just turns it up. The Force just gives us access to it when we don't have that connection. And what it truly is doing is it putting us more in line with the nature of that connection with everything. So the power of the Force is not a bunch of Force powers. It's not. And that's one of the big flaws that we had a long time ago. And I bring that up because a Knight of the Force, a Jedi, has to know that there is this power inside of them, around them, outside of them, but never separate from them. I am one with the Force, and the Force is with me. I am the Force, and the Force is with me. Same statement. Some people prefer the latter because it doesn't even pretend that there's a division. Some people prefer the former. I'm one of those people. Because it shows that while yes, I am the Force, I am not the entirety of the Force. If that was the case, we'd be having this conversation telepathically right now, in full detail. But a Knight of the Force takes the time to build this connection, to build this power. That's why my course is very deeply focused on connection. Because with this connection, all of the other skills that I taught in a previous course, that the other teachers teach, that the other groups teach, for what they teach across any group, all stems from this connection. And this connection can be very spiritual. It can be pushing on religious, and the difference there is a dogmatic approach and ritual and doctrine, and we're not going to get into that tonight at all. One thing it cannot be is it cannot be coldly scientific. Yes, it can be not so fluffy, not so happy, not so new agey, that you can examine it critically. Don't think for a second I'm telling you not to examine what you're feeling, because critical examination is very important for this path, so that you know you're not deluding yourself, that you're not falling into some echo from 20 years ago where people pretended until they thought they actually felt things. Some, the fake it till you make it concept, some people did. Most people did not. It was fake it till you were tired of it. And then you disappear and you feel jaded. And thankfully, some of you come back. Thank you for coming back, Mike. Thank you for sticking. Mike Bark, by the way, for anyone that doesn't know, he is one of those people. He's an echo from a long time ago that got jaded and for some reason, thankfully, came back to it. We're absolutely ecstatic that he's here. This connection to the Force is the most important aspect of being Jedi. As I keep saying, training to be a Knight is easy when you're already a Jedi. Teaching to be a Jedi, developing that connection to where one is truly Jedi. That's the hard part. That's the part that takes the most work. So everybody, I want you to think about your connection to the Force. Think about how much it it interacts with your daily life? How much do you listen to it? How much do you talk to it? And I'm not necessarily meaning prayer or anything, but how often do you ask questions of the Force, knowing that eventually you'll get some kind of an answer? It may not be the Force coming back with a vision. It may be like, so what should I do now? And then, 30 seconds later, some car crashes off in the way you were going to go, and you're like, cool, don't go that way. The omens, synchronicities, that's how the Force talks to us. So, I want everybody to just think about how deep your connection is, how interwoven it is with your daily life. How much do you think about your day? How many decisions do you think about versus how many do you feel? How many do you take a step and go, how do I feel about this? What is my gut telling me? Because this gets in the way all the time of the Force. The Force is here and everywhere, but the Force talks to us most directly here. It's where the gut feeling, I got a bad feeling about this, got a bad gut feeling. That's the Force warning us about things. That's how it works. It gives us physical symptoms to make us think of metaphysical things. So think about it. Think about how much the Force interacts with your life now. And think about how much it used to. Was it stronger before? Has it gotten stronger? Has it gotten weaker? Has it changed at all? Have you gotten so used to it that you don't even really hear it anymore? Do you just think that you don't hear it anymore? Just think. You don't need to do a journal entry on this. If you want to talk to me, feel free. I am always here to talk. I'm always here to interact and listen. We are always open for this. But in the meantime, I am one with the Force. The Force is with me. And I hold no fear, for all is as the Force wills it. May the Force guide and protect you all.